Well, hello, teachers and administrators from Grace Christian Academy. This is Todd Harden, and I've been asked by some of the administrative staff at the school to kind of regurgitate or redo a presentation I did back in January. As we get started here, I want to just apologize. If you hear some sounds in the background, it's our disabled son at 4:30 in the morning deciding he wanted to serenade you. So please just overlook that. Beggars can't be choosers, and I had to fit this in when I could. And I want to go through the talk I gave a while back entitled How to Find Joy in Parent Conferences and Other Contentious Situations. I'll be going through the handout I gave just to give you a point of reference. So let's take a look at the handout as we'll go down it. Now, the problem for many educators is that parent conferences are dreadful experiences filled with triggers, traumas, and terrors. Of course, it doesn't have to be that way. With a little intentionality, you can learn to enjoy these opportunities. Now, here's the pyramid that we're going to be going through. There's some things I want you to understand about the truth of the situation, things we need to apply to that situation, and what we need to do if we're going to truly enjoy the experience of parent-teacher conferences or other conflictual situations. The first thing is that God is present in that moment with us. We are not alone. He tells us He would never leave us nor forsake us. But we have to remember what one of my friends, Bob Kellerman, a biblical counselor, once wrote. He said, when life stinks, our God perspective shrinks. And we sometimes forget God's presence in the midst of difficult times. So as you're sitting there in the moment with your parent that you're talking with, remember, God has not forsaken you. He's not abandoned you. He's right there with you. And just be present with that so that you can be thinking through how He would lead you through the Spirit to respond or react to the parent sitting across the table. The second thing we need to understand is that in most instances, parents don't interact with you in a vacuum. The way I've got it here on the outline or on the triangle or the pyramid is that parent conferences are baggage parties. Parents are generally showing up, and there's usually a problem to be solved or an issue to be dealt with, and they're bringing their own stuff to the meeting with them. When you're sitting there, let's pretend it's just you and the parent. There's two people there, but there's more than two voices that are represented. People have spoken into your lives, parents, coaches, teachers, so on and so forth. People have influenced you, Sunday school teachers, pastors, and so we are, to some extent, the product of those experiences. And so parents are bringing this baggage with them when they come in, especially in a private Christian school where there's tuition to be paid. There's a lot riding on it for the parent. They want to make sure everything goes well. They're spending hard-earned money to put their kid through school, and all of a sudden they're having to deal with this issue. So just realize that not only is God present with you, but parent conferences are baggage parties. They're bringing the baggage. Now remember, you're bringing your baggage as well, so you need to be aware of that, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The other truth that we need to understand is you've been called to be an educator, and that doesn't just mean that you're teaching your students. You don't hang your teacher's hat up when you leave the room, when you leave the classroom. You're a teacher wherever you go. You've been called to be a teacher. And so we're called to teach or educate the parents as well. Now, that does not mean that we are to be condescending in any way. We're to be humble servants, but we are to teach them and help them see things that they can't see super well. So those are the basic truths that we need to understand, that God is present with us in the moment. He's never left us. He's right there. And we can take comfort in that. Parents, these conferences, when parents show up, they're bringing their baggage with them. And so you need to account for that. And then also, we're called to teach or educate the parents as to whatever the issue is and how we can best solve the problem with the child. Well, that brings us to what we need to realize about these three truths that I mentioned. The first thing, when I say God is present, you really have to feel that God is with you in the meeting. He's, think about it. You don't need to, when we get squeezed, we fall back on our training usually. And therefore, we really need to be able to experience God's presence in that moment of stress so that we can keep cool-headed, open-hearted, and then speak the truth in love, if you will. And we'll get into that in a moment as well. So you got to understand that you've got to be consciously aware that God is with you in that moment. It's not relegated to the sidelines. It's not something you wait till Sunday school to interact with. It's not in your quiet time. It's right there in the moment. And so God is with you in the meeting. The other thing you've got to realize is your role in this interaction with the parent is that you are the baggage claim manager, which means you have to stay calm. You have to keep your head about you, your wits about you, so that you can make sure that we stay focused on the issue and not on things that become easily sidetracked as the parent is trying to work through his or her own baggage that they've not really examined. And so when we're talking about teaching the parent, the application there is that you've got to connect, communicate, and show compassion. Take control of it. It's classroom management. That's the way I would look at it. You're the teacher. You're the one that's in charge. Take control of the classroom in a loving, kind way. Enter the person's world. Relate to their experience. Understand the situation, if you will. Relate to their experiences. You can speak redemptively to their hearts. But understand you are the one in control there, and make sure that you keep that mindset. So not only is God present, and we need to be mindful of that during the meeting, but also remember these parent conferences are baggage parties, so the parent's bringing the baggage with him or her, and that we're called to be the baggage claim manager to sort through this stuff so we can keep on task and we can move in the direction we need to go. And that parents are there actually to learn something, believe it or not. And it's a collaborative effort where you show connection, where you connect with them and you communicate well, and then you show compassion. Now, how do we do that, though? Well, if we want to experience God's presence, then we need to develop some self-monitoring skills, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But we also, if we're going to keep our wits about us so that we can sort the baggage properly, we need to use self-soothing techniques. And then, of course, to connect, communicate, and show compassion, we're going to have to speak the truth in love. Let me go down the outline here and give you some ideas on how to do that. How do we develop self-monitoring skills? Well, first, we have to remind ourselves before we ever step into that meeting room that we need to know thy God. We need to know that He would never leave us. He would never forsake us. He is there in the moment. No matter what the bullets are flying at us, He's got this. We got to consciously remind ourselves of that. We have to know thou friends. You got to know your friends. And what I mean by that is, you need to be able to look over across the table and see that person for who they are. An image-bearing, embodied soul who continually worships in one way or another before the face of a holy God. And so it's harder to be upset with someone when you look at him as a friend. And so you need to look at them in that way. Francis Schaeffer, the great philosopher, evangelist, pastor, he would say when he was talking about evangelizing someone, he would say, "He who sits across from you is one of our kind." And you need to remember that. So know thou friends. The third thing, as far as developing self-monitoring skills, is to know thy body. Your body will give away certain tells, if you will, that you're getting stressed out. And so what you need to make sure you do is monitor that pulse rate. The pulse rate, we know biologically that if your pulse rate, let's say, is a resting pulse rate of 72, if it gets up to 82, you have a hard time thinking straight. If it gets over 100, you can't even communicate. So watch your body, pay attention to what's going on in the moment as your body's giving you signals. And then you need to we'll get into this in a moment, you need to use some self-soothing techniques. But just know thyself. And what I mean by that is, be aware of your triggers. When you're sorting through baggage claims, remember there's certain baggage that parent has that may affect your baggage. So the more you know your baggage, and the beauty of that is we tend to be creatures of habit or thematic, and so that we will, something always triggers us, and it'll almost always be the same kind of thing. So if you're aware of those things, you can call it to your own attention, and then you can get back to sorting the baggage properly, and it won't get you off task. So know thy God He's with you. He's never forsaken you. He's got this. Know thou friends. Know your friends. See them that way. Know thy body. Pay attention to your body's signals, and then know thyself. Know what tends to trigger you. Now, so that's how we can self-monitor. How can we, though, use self-soothing techniques? Well, the first thing would be preparatory prayer. Preparatory prayer is interesting because I'm not talking about praying for yourself, although you can do that. You really need to pray for the person that you will be seeing. You will pray for their families. You will pray for their struggles. You will pray for the baggage that you know and don't even know yet. Pray for them. It's really hard to stay angry at someone or to even get triggered by someone if you've been praying for them. So pray for them before you ever go to the meeting. Pray that God will help you see them the way He sees them. And so that's the first thing, preparatory prayer. Another thing is purposeful prayer cards. Create a prayer card. You could do it. You could use something like a card, an index card, put it on the front of the thing, and just have little things to remind you of that person and what you need to do to stay on task. It's psychologically, it's called priming. If you have it easily accessible to you, and it may not even just be about them, it may be yourself. You may even write just something like watch your pulse or watch your breathing, whatever it is, so that you can look down real quickly and then lift a prayer up to the Lord to help you stay calm and focused in that moment. Another thing is a pilot's procedural list. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but if you ever listen to those documentaries where a plane goes down and they're listening to the black box recorders, very often the pilot may be hurling to his death, but he sounds very calm. And the reason he sounds calm is he's been trained to work through specific procedural checklist and then backup checklist and then checklist to those checklists. So he doesn't have time to get all jacked up and it triggered. And so create your own procedural checklist that will help you soothe yourself while you're sitting in the midst of an appointment like this. So those are some self-soothing techniques. Of course, I don't have time to get into all of them or to expand on them, but those are just some things that will give you an idea of the things you can do before you ever sit down or while you're in the meeting. Now, the most important part probably is the how to speak the truth in love. And there, we're looking at what I call HEAR, H-E-A-R, and that's humility, empathy, assertiveness, and respect. And so with humility, it's what we're doing there is we realize that God is for us in the sense that He's accepted us. So we don't need to get defensive. And it's going to feel like you're losing, but what you do in humility is you disarm. You find something you can agree with that the parent has brought up. And what that does is it almost acts like Xanax on their limbic systems. It calms them down because it's really hard to stay angry or emotionally excited when someone agrees with you. So if they bring up something, you can just simply, you can find something about it you can agree with. It's okay to use humor there as long as it's proper and in the right setting. But the idea is to find something that you can agree with. The illustration I usually give is something along the lines of, and just by happenstance, today is Super Bowl Sunday, the day I'm recording this. Let's say that I invited you and your spouse, husband or wife, over for a big Super Bowl party. And my wife, Brenda, had just gone all out. She created a great meal. We're getting ready. We've got our big screen TV here. And about 30 minutes before you guys show up, my cable goes out and I can't see the TV. And I'm furious. I am irate. And I call the cable company. Now, you just have to go with me on this because I know this would never happen. But the lady on the other end says, "Oh, Dr. Hardin, we're so sorry. We've had an outage there. And I tell you what, we've got a technician that's 30 minutes, or he's about 10 minutes away. He'll come over, and because you've been so patient, or because it's our fault, we're going to give you 3 months of cable." Now, here's the thing you got to understand, that when I hear that, my anger level is going to come down because she's agreeing that they made a mistake. And what's even better is she's even agreeing to try to make it right. And so humility is expressed through disarming. You find something you can agree with. Now, let's say if whatever's coming at you from the other person you can't agree with, you can simply say something like this: I can certainly see how you would see it that way. See, I'm acknowledging in a calm way their perspective. And that brings us into the next thing, empathy. Empathy is simply acknowledging the thoughts and feelings of the other person. So when somebody's screaming and yelling at you, you may say, well, I can see, Mr. Jones, you seem quite angry. And that's empathy proper. I'm acknowledging the feeling, because remember, there's a big saying in counseling that we always follow: an unacknowledged emotion only grows stronger. And so we're trying to calm that emotion down, okay? And so we will acknowledge that you seem angry. And then inquiry just simply checks in. Is that true? Have I got that right? That will keep the conversation going. Then we move to the assertiveness statements, which unfortunately is where people typically start, and they shouldn't. The assertiveness statements are the I feel statements. I feel like you're yelling at me, or that you're being unreasonable. In some cases, if you're really being honest, I feel like you're being an idiot. But you can't say that. That's not exactly speaking the truth in love. So assertiveness, you may want to look at it this way, by what we would call an XYZ statement. The X being the behavior that's observable, the Y being the affect it's having on you, and the Z being the consequence of it. When you yell at me, when you raise your voice at me, Mr. Johnson, I feel intimidated, and it leads me. That's the affect, and the consequence is it leads me to want to withdraw from you, and that's not going to do anything to help us further this meeting. That's the XYZ statement. Of course, I can go into this later in another video if you need me to. So humility disarms, empathy acknowledges the thoughts and feelings of the other person, and then assertiveness, that's where you can say your part of what's going on from your side of the conversation. Now, respect is sprinkled throughout that, and so you can use it to soften things. You might say something like, Mr. Johnson, I've interacted with you a long time, and I understand your frustration, and this is normally not like you. At the same time, when you raise your voice to me, do you see what I just did? I put on a prefix there of respect, and I'm respecting the person. Now, the other thing, though, we're also having to do is we're having to respect the institution. And what I mean by that is you have certain guidelines as an educator that you can't stray from. It could be legal guidelines. It could be church policy or school policies or whatever. So you need to stick with what you can do and what you can't do as far as respect. You need to respect the institution. But at the same time, you need to connect with this person by respecting them. Very rarely do things get solved or better when you lose your temper in reaction to the other person losing his or her temper. Well, I hope that that's been helpful. Once again, it's just a quick and dirty assessment of all that. But just remember, the truth is, we'll go through the pyramid one more time. God is present. Parent conferences are baggage parties, and we're called to teach the parents too. And we do that by remembering that God's with us in the meeting. We take on the role of the baggage claim manager, and we seek to connect, communicate, and show compassion with the person sitting in front of us. We develop our own self-monitoring skills to help us be present with God in the meeting. We use self-soothing techniques to help us keep our wits about us so that we can get accomplished what needs to get accomplished and navigate through all of the baggage that's been brought to the meeting. And then we just simply speak the truth in love. Well, I hope that this has been helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I'd be more than happy to entertain any questions or thoughts that you would have. And so if you need me in the future, just let me know. But God bless. It's such a joy and a privilege to work with all of the faculty and staff at Grace Christian Academy. God bless, and we'll talk again soon.